Pressed it.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to Wonkette Weekend Live Chat. I am Robin Panacchia, and this is the lovely and talented Stephen Robinson. We can't ever get married because then I would legally have to become a newscaster. Also because he is married.
Robin Robin Robinson. You wouldn't have to change your name, but Robin
No, there is a
Robinson
Robin
would be.
Robinson. There's a Robin Roberts. There's a whole. I was discussing this with someone recently. Robins with alliterative names are very popular as newscasters.
Not to get too far afield, but one of the most I wouldn't say frustrating, but challenging aspects when you start writing plays or books or whatever is the fact that names are very difficult. Like human beings you can't have an alliterative name. Like it will be confusing on stage unless
Mhm.
it's a literal joke. You can't have multiple people with the same first initial or the same name. But if you look in the real world, like my wife's best friend is also a Katie. And but you can't do that unless that's actual joke. It gets confusing. So it's one of those things where you have to like, oh my God, how many ways can I find unique names? It is just so frustrating. So yeah, one of the things we wanted to talk about this week, Republicans have been even more grotesque than usual lately. Specifically regarding trans students, I think a lot of this has been trying to recreate their victory in Virginia when they kind of rode critical race theory and other, parental rights to victory in that state. And so clearly, if you can flip Virginia, which Biden had won by almost 10 points,
Yeah.
that could possibly work to your favor in states like Michigan, which was much tighter. And the governor of Virginia, he again had this ridiculous anti-trans bill, and the media continues to present him as if he is a moderate in any sort of way, which he is. It just means like a white guy in a sweater
Yeah,
jacket.
basically, like it's like you're saying terrible things, but you're polite about them. That means you're a moderate if you're a Republican. Like,
But it's just, and it's obviously one-sided because it's not like the left. It's not like we have Marjorie Taylor Greenes on the left per se, or Lauren Boebarts who are overtly angry and cruel. Like,
yeah,
Elizabeth Warren is a very polite, quiet woman, but she never gets credit. Like, she's never considered a moderate, even though she speaks in a low tone and dresses, politely and doesn't scare people. They just focus on no, you're a crazy radical liberal. But back to Youngling, his young God. So Young
I
King,
keep going to go pronounce. I always keep going to say like Yingling, like the beer, but this is not that.
that would be awesome. So the rules that he's rolled out, restricting the rights of transgender kids, new policies by the Virginia Department of Education. Um, it's so brutal. I mean, 2 years ago, like if your student was starting under the past administration, like it was a liberal paradise. We had a Democratic near supermajority. Northam was relatively progressive on specific issues like this. I mean, obviously he had his
Yeah.
other challenges, but now you're sort of a sophomore or a junior, and now you've got this. So
Mhm.
his basic rule is further, the legal name and sex of a student can't be changed, even upon written instruction of a parent or eligible student without an official legal document or court order. Teachers and other school officials can only refer to a student by their pronouns associated with their sex at birth.
Mhm.
But they also don't have to refer to a student's preferred names regardless of paperwork if they feel doing so would violate their constitutionally protected rights. I don't believe that there are necessarily, this is very sort of a specific free speech carve out, because I don't think that you're allowed to, at least for now, call students racial
Yeah.
epithets because that's what your religion believes, or you know and so forth. So what is going on? Like, what's your take on this, because it's so
I mean,
overtly
this is
cruel.
like I keep saying, I feel like these are people who are on some level having it's people who peaked in middle school having a midlife crisis on some level. Like they're like, I'm trying to relive the best time of my life, which was, back in middle school when I could be terrible to children for being different. And so now, as an adult, I would also like to do that. And I would like my children to have the privilege of doing that as well, because they've been missing out. The children, they haven't really gotten to truly bully children the way that other children, the way that they used to. Um, and then, you know, if that doesn't happen, where is the next generation of Republicans going to come from? But the thing is that like they just, it's like they're on a freaking cycle, and every time it's like, oh, it's different this time. This time there's a total like great reason for why we're going to be horrible to this particular vulnerable group of people. That is, how we're going to handle that. And we are going to that's how we're going to feel good about ourselves. I mean, literally, we just went through, they were attacking immigrants, and they're still attacking immigrants, but like, they sort of like moved on from there. Then, well, immigrants, critical race theory, now trans kids, and they've already like, they just sort of like juggle them. Like, which one are we the most angry at right now? And the funny thing is, like, they also like forget about the things that they're mad about, like the various other academic terms they're mad about. When was the last time you heard about cultural Marxism? Like they're not even talking about that anymore. Remember when everything was going to be cultural Marxism?
Well, a lot of it is to clearly scare people, like whoever we can scare and demonize. Education, they certainly get mileage of. Tudor Dixon in Michigan this week, I'd written about it when she was talking about the schools are grooming and recruiting queer kids and so forth by just showing. And I think what strikes is the idea of parental rights was something Democrats kind of fell down on how to respond to. Like, how do you do that without coming across as Terry McAuliffe did, of sounding like parents should have no rights over what their children are taught or treated.
This also is parental rights. It's parental rights to like send your kid to school without those kids being bullied. It's parental rights to, let your kid not be treated nicely instead of, it's all, there was that thing I wrote about, oh my God, like the thing recently where they took all these kids to a thing that was supposed to be, it was in Louisiana. Sorry, I was trying to think of the state. It was supposed to be a college fair, but it was like, let's talk about Jesus and how you should forgive your rapists and how and bully all the trans kids. That's a violation of parental rights. They don't consider that to be a violation of parental rights. They don't consider forcing religion on people to be a violation of parental rights, which it is. Like, if you're gonna, if you're gonna force Christianity on people, that is, a parental rights issue for people, like parents who do not want to raise their children to be Christians. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's clearly inconsistent, because at first it was sort of the parental rights, and it worked in their favor because the angriest parents guarding critical race theory were white, cis, Christian extremists. So they were saying, you are violating my parental rights, and there's certainly you can get mileage from that connects with sort of the average voter who wants to believe like, oh, you're getting in the way of my child, or you're
like, you're going to teach my kid to be tolerant, and then they're not going to like me. Basically what it is.
Well, and in fairness, they view what we consider tolerance to be, they fundamentally disagree with our way of viewing the world. So being tolerant, they believe, is indoctrinating their children into leftist Marxist ideology. But here, what is weird is that, not particularly weird, but the state is saying, we will not recognize your parental rights as a parent who's supportive of your trans child. So we
Because
can't guarantee
it
the
was
teacher will
never
continue.
about that. It was never really about parental rights. It was always about how do we like get to discriminate against this particular group of people.
Oh yeah.
Like,
And I mean, and growing up in the 80s, I had a pretty racist teacher
yeah.
once. It was bad enough even for the South that I got moved. She I think apparently it was a gifted and talented class, and she wanted a different black kid. There was two black kids who could, and Raphael was, the kid was Raphael, but he was in the some other teacher's gifted and talented class, and she would always complain that she got stuck with me and not him. He was the one who was liked. I was like 7 or 8. And it was a big thing. She was really angry
Jesus
about it.
Christ.
And so they sort of moved me. She didn't wind up with Raphael either. She didn't wind up with her idealized black child. He was a handsome young man. He looked like a young Muhammad Ali. I did not. So I mean,
It's okay. I didn't either. So
so, but even then I was sort of moved. I don't even know they will do that here, where it's like, well, my teacher does not acknowledge my gender preference, does not acknowledge my name. The name stuff is particularly weird because I worked with a woman, and this is not untrue, but she was a cis woman, but Christina, we all called her Chris. So I think what they're saying now is like, oh, well, the real nicknames are okay. But if
yeah.
your nickname is essentially, if you're Steven, you can be Steve. But if you're Steven, you can't be Stephanie. We won't call you
Mhm.
that. Because generally speaking, every teacher would at the first say, what would you prefer to be
Yeah.
called? I mean, most teachers, unless they're the absolute worst, would call, Jonathan Johnny, if that's what he went by. And so this is
Right.
just beyond the pale. It's like going out of the ordinary to be
I
cruel.
remember we had a lot of Vietnamese kids in our school who had to like change their name to American names so that the teachers could pronounce them, and which in retrospect was so weird. But yeah, that would they'd probably be okay with that. They'd be like, oh, well, foreign names we can change as long as, it's because really it has nothing to do with like, oh, we don't want to use people's not real birth names. It's we don't like trans people. Like,
Yeah. I
but
just,
I'm bummed.
you and I are both, obviously non-religious people, but to me, it's like if your religion, what I resent most about that is sort of hiding behind your religion to be a cruel person, as if you need to go to church every Sunday to find the strength to be a jackass. And what you're sort of kind of doing is like, oh, I can't, a 12-year-old, I can't call by their preferred, I'm going to hurt this
Yeah.
kid. And the Christians, I'm sorry, I've read these guys.
Yeah.
They sound like, in their cruelty, they sound like a Norman Bates or any sort of Hannibal Lecter serial killer, and how calm they can be about their cruelty, which is just, I love my students, but if it would be unfair to them to lie to them and call them, their name that isn't their name. Obviously, in the way they say it, the sort of
Yeah.
like, in a weird way, it is more grotesque to me
Oh yeah.
than in Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's just overtly cruel. Like, she's just like, I'm not pretending that I have some grand scheme of like recognizing from God, whatever. No, I'm a horrible human being, and this is my jam. So it's an interesting political thing, because
Yeah.
inevitably that's an issue
Well, because they're
where,
trying to like they're coming at it from every direction, trying to find ways in which this time it's different, in which it can be taken seriously, and they keep varying their tactics. And no matter what, it's still coming down to the exact same thing, which is we don't like people who are different and we would like them to stop that now, please. And it would be really great if they would say, hey, you're really wonderful. I want you to be happy. So I will pretend to be someone other than the person that I am in order to make you, the most wonderful person in the world, feel more comfortable.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah. And it's dangerous. I think what we've seen in Virginia is sort of what you're going to see it's what Tudor Dixon would do. It's what a lot of these folks would do, and you get the clear aspect of the cruelty upon it. What's
Mhm.
somewhat tragically ironic, I'm going to speak somewhat vaguely here, but I know some folks who fled Texas
Yeah.
because they didn't want to be essentially locked up for child abuse. They support their trans daughter, and it was not particularly a safe place for them to be in Texas as someone who's supported that. And now they're in a state of Oregon where you believe that's going to be true, and you believe it's clear,
Mhm.
but we're have in a disturbingly close race. Christine Drazen might win the governor's race. She's forced birth, uh, typical terrible Republican.
Mhm.
The challenge here is that Betsy Johnson, as a centrist Democrat who now no longer a Democrat, but she is a centrist, sort of Manchin style, who has never liked Kate Brown. And so she's running as an independent, and which, everyone has the right to do that. I've never been someone who said you should not, but to whatever extent the result is going to be potentially that Drazen could win. There's some polls where she's like, a point ahead of Tina Kotek, the Democrat. And what's interesting is National Review, and she was on Fox last week. And when she taught, no one says that clearly you are only close to winning because the votes being split is being presented as this even blue Oregon is having a backlash against wokeism in schools and against the crime and whatever, because she's going to bring back the sweeps and so forth, and the homeless folks, and it's scary because she's the type who, if she were to win, she'd bring in the sweeps. God knows what happens to these folks, but the downtown would get cleared up. She would unleash hell in the schools and would present as, I'm like stopping the backlash of woke, of the wokeism in Oregon. So November is sort of election night is going to be a very long night in Oregon, needlessly so. Um,
Mhm.
I think at a certain point, either Tina Kotek or Betsy Johnson should, I would say, endorse the other and just say, look, we can't let this woman win.
I think that Betsy Johnson should go back to, making rhinestone laden jewelry and shoes.
She's
Um,
a
what,
she's
like,
a
I know, I'm kidding. But
I know, no, but she is a timber heiress, but does not.
timber heiress. That, yeah,
Yes, so
that's so Twin Peaks.
it's a lot of money you can make, and but yes, not the lovely Betsy Johnson, but this is a very
I know.
horrible one, and she but yeah, she hates Kate Brown, and that was true. There was always that sort of tension between sort of the quote unquote sort of Manchin era kind of Democrats and sort of the liberals who and now it could really blow up in her face. The National Review had written that they'd seen that they loved how she'd given a master class in a debate about how to run as a forced birth Republican in a blue state, which essentially all she did was sort of bobbed and weaved and just said, "Oh, look, I will never yield on my pro-life positions, but obviously I'll follow the law. Gosh, what harm could I do? The legislature is all Democrat. Like, what could I do as a humble governor for
Yeah,
abortion rights?"
the entire state.
And obviously
But
she
then,
would not, like Kate Brown had joined Jay Inslee and Gavin Newsom to form sort of this West Coast offensive, saying, if you need to seek abortion rights, you can come to the state and receive,
yeah.
we won't rat you out to different states. Clearly, Drazen would yank Oregon from something like that. She would not protect anyone. And obviously, she
Mhm.
would not say F you to a national abortion ban if it were to be passed. All she's sort
Yeah.
of thinking and nodding. Tudor Dixon's doing the same thing in Michigan. Rona McDaniel had commented like, "Oh, look, if you are, you can vote directly on abortion. It's going to be a referendum, and then now allows you to vote as your conscience says for this, even though it's been proven again and again that Republicans ignore referendums when they are
Yeah.
governor.
Well,
So
like in Michigan, like they really did not want any kind of referendum because it's very obvious that no, people are not going to be voting in favor of making abortion illegal. They didn't even do it in Kansas. One thing that I have been seeing, I don't know if you saw the Reuters article this week about how big oil is now having trouble in Texas because people are leaving and they don't want to live there because of abortion law. Because sorry, cat distracting me. Because of abortion laws, because Christianity is being forced on kids in school, because of the anti-trans laws. And the thing is, there is going to be a lot of that. There are going to be a lot of people leaving these areas because they're essentially being made unlivable. They are making it so people truly, cannot live there unless they're, these wackadoo Christians who need everyone to be exactly like they are, who follow
yeah,
their religion, love who they say they're allowed to love, be who they say they're allowed to be. And that's going to be really difficult for businesses in terms of like bringing employees from other areas, encouraging people to work there. It's not going to end well, honestly.
yeah.
I
I
don't
mean,
think.
Josh Hawley, I think, commented earlier, seemingly in delight about that, about all liberals leaving, going to states, because obviously, even if Texas has the population of Wyoming, it would still have 2 senators,
Yeah.
and you could pass an abortion ban national, but like essentially, we already like at a 50-50 Senate, um, Democrats represent 41 million more people
Yeah.
than Republicans. They don't care, so they will still um, enforce
Oh,
their
yeah.
rule on
Oh,
us.
for
So
sure.
um,
I'm
it,
just saying it's actually also the irony is it's going to eventually affect the people who do want to stay in these
oh yeah,
places because there are not um, exactly a ton of options. Like, they're not going to be able to like find places to work. They're not going to be able to, send their kids to have a well-funded school. They're like, it's going to affect them in a bad
oh
way
yeah,
eventually. Like, it's not,
oh absolutely. I think the wealthy, unfortunately, find ways to
yeah,
they want public schools to be a mess. They want to build. I was talking to my wife about this, of how it's very strange in New York, how um public schools, like essentially it's understood that no one sends their kids to public schools in certain neighbor, right? But
yeah,
even though they're funded by property values, it's like, well, you're on Park Avenue in the Upper East Side, surely your property value funded public school would be good. And
mhm,
ultimately what it comes down to more and more is that, well, they don't want to be around poor people,
yeah,
especially in New York, because it's kind of like Park Avenue is only like half a block in many ways away from some crushing poverty, uh, on even as near as Second Avenue. So they just don't want to be around people who are different, and they're fine with um no, that's good.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it is to that point. I think that's why DeSantis and other governor, specifically DeSantis, have been attacking their new line of attacking woke corporations. So it's the idea of like the corporations are the ones that are out of step, and we're going to
oh
attack
yeah,
them, which is interesting. I mean, it's one of those things that you've commented on. It can be slightly alluring as unless you look and obviously believe beneath the surface as a liberal to see Republicans going, corporations suck, blah blah blah. Like, oh wow, that's awesome. Like, oh wait, no,
yeah.
yeah. And they're the ones doing it. It's still,
And the
Democrats
thing
have
is,
been
they're
very
still the
pro.
ones who are like, corporations suck, but they still should not have to pay any taxes at all. God forbid. No, no.
Yeah,
And they are playing on it because it's not a stupid move because, like, I would say that Democrats and Republicans we're very much under the assumption that people love corporations and think that corporations are wonderful in a way that is not factually true. And even regular like Republicans, except, with some exceptions, we're not like in general, what's really great? These giant corporations that are, clearly fucking us all over, especially, things like Walmart, where like we can't have like regular stores anymore because, they're taking over all of our downtowns. There was never this great love for corporations that either Democrats or Republicans believe there were. And Democrats could have gone against, and some do, but they were like afraid, like, oh no, if we go against this, or attack corporations, the people who love corporations will think that we're bad and we're scary communists.
Yeah.
And we, they were a little bit nervous about playing on that because, oh no, socialists, they're being mean to our corporations.
And I would say mainstream, is the argument of like, because sometimes both the punditry and others can have it both ways. So, I would say that regardless of the AOC's rhetoric or Warren's comments or Sanders' comments, it's clear that what's considered mainstream Democratic liberalism is relatively pro-corporate.
Yeah.
And if you say that, then folks get upset. It's like, no, we're more liberal than thou. We get results done, whatever. No, I mean, it's clearly at the same time, you also say that these guys are out of step. Whereas I think far more of mainstream Republican rhetoric is overtly anti-corporate now. And it's kind of, to your point, that absence. So there was clearly, frustration with corporations, clearly frustration with people losing their jobs from going back to NAFTA and other things. And Donald Trump, of all people, was one of the first to seize on that. And others have gotten to sort of the faux populism and like, these are the people who are controlling your life, and they are
and they are like literally they are the rich, like they are the true corporate assholes, but they know enough to sort of like read the room and say people are angry about this thing, and it is not, I do think there was the impression that it was kind of like a third rail issue, like you didn't want to touch it because if you disparage corporations, if you disparage things that are sacred to America, it'll, turn out badly. And I think that, that was a thing that was like highly overestimated.
Absolutely. I think perhaps the biggest example of what you're describing is Kristen Cinema, her entire, hopefully brief political career, because people try to figure out what she's doing. Why is she doing this? Why is she behaving this way? And is she bought off or so whatever? And in a weird way,
or is she just an asshole?
And that is, that is always the simplest explanation. But in many ways, the simplest explanation is just she has been conditioned by the folks around her, maybe whatever, to believe this idea that a corporate-friendly centrist Democrat who talks about MSNBC-friendly stuff is going to be very popular. And you're not. Like, she doesn't believe in anything. And that's always when we've talked about that for a long time, even before Cinema, about certain Democrats who their rhetoric is essentially, don't get scared. I won't scare you by daring to believe anything.
Yeah.
I get results done. I'll work with anyone, even though, I God forbid I say that some of these folks are bad actors. I won't do that. And I will come, and I will keep the liberals in their place and that sort of thing. And so that's how Cinema is running. And she's consistently unpopular. So Arizona,
people do like saying like, oh, we're going to keep the, like you're saying, keep the liberals in their place, like keep, the excesses of the left. We're going to, make sure to keep that, under wraps. Like, see Republicans being like, I will tamp down the excesses of the right. They're like, we're going to lean into this.
Yeah, no one wants to elect the hall monitor. I'll keep the left under control, the hall monitor candidate. Whereas every Republican runs on, I will give a voice to my constituent.
Yeah.
And so Cinema believing that I don't have to represent my constituent. So she's loathed by everyone. There was a poll that came out by the AARP in Arizona. She's loathed by everyone, underwater with every group. And it's sort of clear. It's interesting. It came out around the same time. So Arizona, this week, a judge there has lifted the injunction against sort of this draconian abortion ban in Arizona. It's like it goes back to prior to Arizona's founding. So banning pretty much all abortions, no exceptions for rape, incest, or medical conditions or complications of the mother, because that's been the confusion, right? Like, okay, there's a life of the mother issue, but there's also, well, there's difference between the life and health of the mother.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also like, if a doctor is very worried about going to prison,
Yeah.
they will sometimes wait too long, and then the woman or the person dies on the operating table. These are things that are very dangerous. Like, people will die. They've been dying
Yeah.
as a
But
result of it.
here's the thing. These people are not actually, I mean, not all of them, but there is a certain segment of the anti-choice crowd that does love the idea, storyline wise, of a woman dying in childbirth to save her child. Like,
Oh yeah,
that is very much romanticized. And like,
effing
it makes me,
Star Wars rather.
yeah, but it is very much like it's a beautiful story of sacrifice. And some people do like those stories because they're like, oh wow, that means my mom would love me that much as well. I haven't necessarily seen like actual politicians saying it, but I have seen it like in the forums where they're talking amongst themselves. They're like, a woman should be like so happy to give her life for her child, and what kind of terrible woman wouldn't do that? So it's fine if she dies because she's terrible and selfish. And so much of the anti-abortion rhetoric in general is, we're going to curb female selfishness. We will put a stop to it.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's overtly, and to not put that in those, it's one of those issues where, to go back to what we were saying before, you've got to pick a side. You've got to call out the bad actors, what's motivating these laws. And so Cinema doing her bipartisan shuffle and what she wants, like, if someone who does not believe anything, it's very inconvenient for centrist Democrats who don't believe anything to argue for reproductive health. Because for now, you're not anymore. It's one thing to sort of basically say you're defending the status quo. Well, this is the law. The judges should not overturn. Now it's like, well, you need to actually be activist about this. And so she was sort of giving her typical, very measured stump speech where she's tweeting, like, where she never says the word abortion. She's talking about,
no, of course not, because
healthcare.
That's frightening.
Which, what you can say abortion because this is what's being banned. She doesn't at any point like, she says, I'll continue to work with anyone, which are Democrats, not Republicans. No Republicans want to preserve especially in her wackadoodle state. The Republicans in her state, the wackadoodle Republicans in her state, want to protect abortion rights. I'll continue working with anyone to preserve reproductive women's health care and their decisions. And she's useless. Like, obviously she's not going to overturn, what she could do is, vote to get rid of the filibuster, et cetera, et cetera. She won't do that. What she could do, when she didn't, was to suggest that maybe voters should select the Democrat running for governor, Katie Hobbs, who says that on her first day, she will veto this bill. She'll pass executive order, ban, getting rid of the bill. She will do something. She will actively fight for it. She's running against election denier and straight up forced birther Carrie Lake.
She's so many other things as well.
Every bad thing.
Don't fence her in, Stephen.
So, I mean, I'll continue
so
working.
Many other qualities. She loves, white supremacists and hates trans people and her former drag queen friend. Like, she's
terrible. And Cinema won't say her name, won't say who, like, she won't identify what the problem is. And it sounds like, in a way, I sound like Republicans who were attacking Obama for not saying radical Islam. And that was BS. This is because he actually there was a reason for what he was saying. And he actually had he was actually attacking these people. Here it's like, no, you need to
really stupid thing to want people to say. Part of the problem was that people hate us. Like,
Yeah.
let's make them hate us more. Yeah,
Yes.
that would be great. Like,
Well, yes, as he said, you actually do need radical Muslims who are in fact not terrorists to help
yeah,
you against those people. And and there's similar rhetoric now about you don't want to insult all Republicans, but she's not even doing that. She won't even call out the extremists. And on top of that, when she says she wants to work, she's gonna devote all her time to the saving abortion rights. She's speaking Monday at the McConnell Center, the Mitch McConnell Center, like
yes,
not like about the joys of bipartisanship. That's sort of her speech at the Mitch McConnell, who fundamentally does not believe in bipartisanship. Like
yeah. Just like, the lessons in being a doormat. Like,
how could I be a
you know,
useful idiot? Like, why do you? This is your Duke of Windsor moment. You're gonna be like Kristen Cinema. You're gonna be like, you really want your Duke of Windsor moment where you're there shaking hands with the bad guy. And it's a photo of like, boy, that was some really bad judgment there.
yeah.
So, she is awful.
No,
I
she's like the political equivalent of part of what I was writing about today. And actually, I took about several paragraphs about this out, but the whole like, I'm a cool girl. I hate other girls because they're too much drama, and I like guy things and effortlessly skinny while eating lots of cheeseburgers. She's like the political equivalent of that. Like
yeah,
I'm not
totally.
like other girls. I'm not like other Democrats. I'm cool. I'm a cool Democrat. I
Someone,
basically
yeah,
think Republicans are way better than us.
someone convinced her that was a useful path, and
Yeah.
that
She's
you
totally
know,
like trying to cool girl her way
and
into the hearts of
that Republicans won't
Republicans
shake.
everywhere.
Like people, but it's interesting because I think Democrats still believe every time with Cinema. There will be some Democrat when I write about her. There'll be someone who comments that, oh, well, don't get her mad because she'll run as a Republican. And I'm just like, well, are you unaware that of the purges within the Republican Party? Like she voted to impeach Trump
Yeah.
twice, to remove him from office
Oh, yeah.
twice. She voted for like, she's somewhat of a loyal Democratic vote in certain ways that would not get her five step. Like the idea, she only has her seat because
Yeah.
Jeff Flake was too rhino to win a primary and he quit. So it was somewhat open. She was running against McSally. So there's no room for her acting as if she
Yeah.
could in fact run as a Jeff Flake, even though she's not as conservative as Jeff Flake. So she's just running as a useless person.
Yeah.
I believe
Well, I
in
think
these
it looks
things,
like
but
yeah.
not enough to do anything about them, which no one
Yeah.
cares about. Like, but I'm sorry. You get, it's frustrating to me. Do you get this of where people don't seem to recognize that Republicans, while evil, believe in things? Carrie
Yeah.
Lake believes in things. Kristen Cinema believes in nothing. And so she cannot just say, I'm going to run as a Republican. Like the MSNBC Republicans are done. They can get a
Hmm.
job on MSNBC, but they cannot run as, there's no path for them.
Yeah.
These Republicans in these states, the Republican electorate wants fighters, pit bulls who believe in stuff, and what they believe in is horrifying. But they believe
But
in
they're
it.
just really enthusiastic about it, and enthusiasm is, always contagious, and that is the scary thing. People like to think like, oh, being measured and vague about what you are into is more attractive because then people can imprint what like their ideals onto you, but it never actually works out that way. Like I've never really quite seen it work out that way, except to some degree with Obama. I will say I think it did to some degree with Obama. Like a lot of like liberals were like, "Oh, he's super liberal," and a lot of like moderates were like, "Oh, great, he's a moderate." And he was like, "I am in fact a moderate." Um, I am to the right of Richard Nixon on some things. I'm
Mhm.
not super liberal, but people
Yeah.
did imprint a lot onto him. And so I think that there is that idea that, okay, that's what you want to be. You want the leftists to think you're a leftist and the conservatives to think, or the moderates to think that you're one of them. And I
Well,
don't necessarily think
yeah.
that works that well,
Well,
except,
for Obama, I think two things to your point. One, his being able to conveniently say, I oppose the Iraq war and I would not have voted for the Iraq war, got him a lot of cred
yeah.
amongst the left.
Oh,
They're,
yeah.
defying, whereas I think Cinema and others view that as just, oh, if I defy orthodoxy about the
Yeah.
Democratic Party, that's enough. And it's like, well, there's a difference between I'm running on unlike every other mainstream Democrat, I would not have supported the Iraq war, which is bad and terrible, and saying, no, I'm actually a Democrat who won't get rid of the filibuster and won't support abortion rights and will do a little curtsy thing,
Yeah.
and voting down minimum wage does not help you. The other is like when she compares herself to um John McCain. John McCain again defied he defied the party on torture,
Yeah.
like literally not torturing people.
As a person who was tortured. It's like when Bob Dole was like, hey, what if you guys supported the Americans with Disability Act? And they were all like, fuck you, Bob Dole, and your wheelchair and the wheelchair you came in on. Um,
And he's
like,
also he was far more, and Dole, you mentioned Dole, they were both more charismatic than Cinema. Like there was a world where
Dole, where there's no world where Bob Dole was was charismatic.
I mean, perhaps that's not the right word.
Like,
He was viewed as witty and charm. Like he would go on TV shows. Folks did like him. Not like
oh,
not like you, I'm saying, but he was viewed as he was kind of the witty kind of guy.
oh,
McCain
I was
definitely
always
would
like
appear
stiff
on
and like,
Daily Show.
I'm Bob Dole. Like,
That was not that was not your best. That was like a very almost good Norm Macdonald Bob Dole. Uh,
Bob Dole.
but Cinema lacks that entirely, and she's not some. I mean, the press, the media actively loathes her for good
Yeah.
reason. She's sort of a jerk. So there's no what is your pattern there? Like she's not someone who Jon Stewart's going to welcome on the show and have
Yeah.
a pleasant chat with, like he did with uh McCain so many times. So McCain was kind of a media darling. She is not.
Oh yeah. Oh, McCain was like the biggest media darling for years and years and years. That just people were, although I think here's the thing, Democrats really were like John McCain. Now that is a guy we can respect. And there was always the assumption that, if John McCain ever ran for president, look out there because he would just kill it. But no, the actual Republicans liked Sarah Palin
Oh yeah.
better than him.
She keeps getting blamed for what was clearly Obama's a great candidate and McCain
Yeah.
was not particularly well liked by his base. And somehow the rhetoric has to be that it's all her,
Well,
that
that's
she
a
was the one
much
that
more
changed.
appealing storyline. People love the ideas. Oh, she said some stupid shit to Katie Couric, and then America was like, absolutely not. We are not. That is not who we are as a people, Sarah Palin. But no, I think they liked her way more than they liked John McCain. She
Um,
has had a way more, she had like a totally vibrant career in TLCing and various
I don't
other
know.
shit
I
after.
think we've discussed this on the chat or maybe offline, but I think Palin, in fairness, is terrible for me to say about in fairness for Palin. But the Palin of 2008 was no dumber, quote unquote, than George W. Bush. Did not
No.
sound any worse than him. I think, I don't want to psychoanalyze. There's been a clear deterioration over the past decade or so where she now sounds like the parody, if that makes sense. Like she
Yeah.
sounds like the parody of herself. At the time, she was kind of like that folksiness, which worked. Like that worked for Judge George W. Bush. Unfortunately, like voters like that. And so, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Democrats were convinced that Romney and McCain are ideal candidates, and I think what's happened is that Republicans stopped listening to Democrats who said
Yeah.
this, because this was also the same party that believed John Kerry, um, Al Gore, um, Walter Mondale, and Mike Dukakis were electable candidates. So maybe these are not folks who are great judges of electability. We kind of rolled the dice and won out
Well,
with
I think, it's sort of,
Obama.
well, I think a lot of what is like, yes, Republicans were listening to Democrats, and Democrats to some degree are still listening to Republicans in terms of what they would say is electable. Like, what do we think Republicans would think is electable? But and they were smart enough to stop listening to us. Are we smart enough to stop listening to them is the question. I hope so. Disappointingly enough, by the way, I will say, I had not gotten for a while that I look like Sarah Palin, and I just got it like a week ago, and I was like, no. And I
Yep.
don't, I'm just a lady with brown hair. I look like
Yeah.
whoever. I can get imprinted. I'm very imprintable. I look like anyone with brown hair and bangs.
Well, can we discuss for a moment, as an excellent transition, discuss something that you are responsible for, killing the guest room. You'd written about this
Yes.
yesterday. Your generation, the millennials, have
I'm sorry that you guys
slain,
no longer have any place to stay when you come and visit us.
you half murdered.
Oh.
The guest room never made sense to me. It's sort of this one room. I mean, unless you're running a bed and breakfast, it's sort of a
Yeah.
room that you're sort of devoting solely to. And I would watch certain there'd be magazine spreads or sometimes like home chat shows where it's like the lady has the flex of like, and here's how I decorate it, like it is like her bed and breakfast.
Yeah.
But unless there's not like she has guests there every weekend or something, it's just every so often someone's going to come through. um and the irony there being that often folks with the money,
Yeah.
the means to afford a whole separate room, especially if you have kids. So every kid has their own room, parents have their own room. So you've got like a fourth or fifth bedroom devoted solely for guests. You tend to be of a social circle of people who are like can afford a hotel or might prefer a hotel because
Yeah.
it's part of the vacation.
I would generally prefer a hotel for the most part.
You just need to kind
Like,
of relax at the end of the day, and times have changed. We
yeah,
have a hospitality
I
industry.
need to, my me time, and I don't need anyone knowing how long it takes me to get ready. That's not their business.
Yeah, exactly like that. And
Um,
you don't want to live in fear of flooding the toilet. Like
yeah, yeah,
the hotel, no matter what happens, you can call the front desk. Someone will come up
exactly.
and say, "Oh, well, you're gross, but we're strangers and we don't have to like ever discuss what just happened," and they move on with their lives. The guest room. I mean, I'm Gen X. I was born in
Yeah,
'74. My memory of this was sort of, we had a guest room only in the sense that I was an only child, so it was a 3-bedroom house and whatever. But there was one leftover bedroom. But there's often would be, for people I knew, grew up around, it was kind of like the kids would have to give up their bed for the grandparents who were in town or
yeah,
something, and they slept on the couch. And that was what was understood of part of the hospitality, because you also don't want to make it so nice that people stay forever. So sort of like there was this whole period of like, I don't even want to. They are fabulous nails. You don't want it to make it so there were people. I had a friend. She didn't want to put a pull-out couch in her spare room. Instead of like, why don't you just make this an office and have a pull-out couch? Like, no, because pull-out couches are uncomfortable. And it's like, well, that's kind of the point. It's
yeah.
fine.
You
It
want
is.
them to leave.
It's like it's comfortable
You
enough
don't
for
want
2
them to
nights.
stay.
I don't want like once I've got some therapeutic action, people are gonna leave. That we're gonna stay forever, and so that's why I feel like I don't know, the guest room thing is one of those articles that's felt very.
It's just,
There's a homelessness crisis,
yeah,
and so if
like,
you have a guest room, why don't you
give it to a homeless person. Like,
have like a literal boarding house like those
here's the thing,
days, like let
the things that
people.
we keep murdering supposedly are like we're always murdering them just by being poor or by like not having enough money or room for those things. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I feel like killing implies, active dislike. Like, we really hate guest rooms and we don't want people to come and stay at our houses that we don't have because we live in apartments because we're jerks. We're selfish and bad. Like, it always comes down to because they cannot afford to do this thing, or because, just very, like, tastes have changed, but no, they've actually murdered the thing. We're destroying Applebees. Fuck you. I worked in an Applebees. I got fired from an Applebees. I'll have you know, America. Yeah, they tried to make me like do that squatting thing at the end of the table. I did not care for that. Though eventually the real reason I was fired was because they thought my plain black headband could be misconstrued for a gang symbol. In Pittsburgh, New York. I don't know if there is a like whiter place on earth, but like they're not, like if there were like an official bag of Pittsburgh, New York, it would be a Vera Bradley bag.
Yeah.
Like it's
Well, I mean, your gang affiliations are well documented, Robin, but can you explain what is it, the crouching or whatever that you were describing, like they wanted you to do something. What was that before? Like the kneeling?
Okay. When you work at like a terrible chain restaurant, as I did, they ask you, they're like, it was a thing. Like, I don't know how much of a thing it is now, where like you're supposed to like get down on the table, like squat and be like, hey gang, how are you guys doing today? Are you ready for some apps? And it's horrible. I'm like, this is terrible, and I hate this. I don't like it when other people do it to me.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm
one of the gang. What's up, guys?
Do the folks who run these, or like, I don't know. For me, it would just I kind of know that someone's dying inside, right? Like,
Yeah.
so that's not fun for me. Like, I've lost my appetite. This woman is
This is
in such
humiliating.
obvious pain. Like, I just can't connect with people who enjoy, like, act like, could either do not know that other people are suffering or can't connect with that suffering. But that, I don't also hate my spouse. There's like another article that came out about, look, just accept it. You hate your spouse, that there are moments where you hate your spouse. And I just generally don't. And I'm not like trying to sound like Pollyanna-ish or whatever. It's just that for me, there's a difference between people are annoying. We all know that. But I don't, what rises to hatred for me is not like not emptying the dishwasher, but obviously being cruel to trans kids, to bring it back to what we were discussing before. So if I actually hate someone, like, oh, this person is cruel and heartless and all, then I probably should not be in this relationship. But if they just, leave the milk out and now it's lukewarm and, oh no, darn you, that just seems sort of okay, that's annoying, that's whatever. But living with people is part of that. It's sort of accepting that people are never going to be perfect. But what's your take on that, though? Because I read someone had responded to this article and said that the whole kind of, you just accept that you're going to hate your spouse, was actually trying to convince women to stay in toxic, perhaps even abusive relationships. Do you think that's some of what's going on?
Oh, for sure. Like, there has definitely been a bigger push lately to sort of normalize, I think, staying in terrible relationships. And also that goes along with the right-wing push that has been existing for a very long time now. Thank you. There's like someone on there calling me a slut parade lady, which, like, cool, but
that's the automatic
block. Thank you. Sorry, I get a little distracted when that happens. What was I saying?
About not hating your spouse.
Oh, okay. So for a very long time now, especially like not necessarily politicians, but now politicians, there's been a push for to get rid of no-fault divorce, so that you cannot just divorce someone for no reason. You have to actually prove that they did something wrong, which is kind of funny because we don't even have that in jobs in this country, whereas every other country does have that. Um,
I
like you
mean,
can't fire your like they want to. You can't fire your spouse for any reason. They don't want at will marriage. They want just cause firings from marriage.
I mean, being a correspondent was a great career path, apparently, according to the Gay Divorcee, both the musical and the movie, where essentially a person's role was to be found with the woman who wants a divorce, so that
Yeah.
when there's fault, and then the person can get a divorce. Yeah, there's this JD Vance, as I think you'd comment on this, JD Vance and others for this whole thing of like, oh, well, when there was no fault divorce, people stayed together. And if there was
Like,
had
yeah,
been no fault
and it
divorce,
was bad.
my grandparents wouldn't have stayed together. It's like, well, okay, well, maybe there's a reason for that. Like the idea that you need to literally be imprisoned often by a choice you made when you were 19, if you want to go back to that period. It's like, okay, it's not working if you really hate each other, leave. And it's not easy to get divorced. I mean, people have this whole idea that getting divorced is easy. Everyone would be like Liz Taylor if that was the case, and getting divorced is easy. Becoming trans is
I mean,
easy.
I always want to be like Liz Taylor. I think it's weird to not want to be like Liz Taylor. Everyone should go. She is
you
like the
look
most beautiful
more
woman
like
who ever existed, and so glamorous.
you look more
Um,
like Liz Taylor than Sarah Palin.
that is so nice of you, and it's not at all true, and I recognize that. But thank you.
But yeah, I mean, that struck me as strange. I mean, a lot of, and there's been women who's writing this, it just seemed like they seemingly really loathe their spout. And it's just like, well, if it gets to a point of hatred, like why? That's a very unfortunate way to live. And again, I try not to hate people in general. And if it rises to a level of hatred, like Giuliani, for instance, then it's kind of, but even him, it's sort of,
I hate lots of people.
like what's also is interesting, he's dying, so it's enough. It's like you and I had been talking about earlier this week. So Woody Allen is retiring. He announced he's not making any more movies. I think I have complicated feelings about him because I feel he was someone whose work I really admired when I was young. I grew out of admiring it because I thought it started getting less good. Some of the stuff doesn't hold up as well.
Mhm.
Over the past years. I'm still salty that he was nominated for Best Original Screenplay for Blue Jasmine, which is obviously a riff on Streetcar Named Desire. It is clearly
I
an
didn't see it,
adaptation.
but
So that has always infuriated me. But online are sort of people who, when an announcement was made, or suddenly like drudging up the scandal again and accusations against him. And we're not going to get into all that here because my larger point was sort of, well, in a weird way, when it came to the day that Woody Allen would say, I'm no longer making a movie, it's kind of like, he's 87 years old. He's older. Like, I don't know. I get to a point of like, yeah, like whatever you don't like about this guy, he's kind of about to die or maybe very ill or who knows what's happening, but clearly he's transitioning from a point of life. Um, and why do you think this is the case that this comes up a lot? Like, you'd written about Will Smith last week where it felt like people, and I got the feeling people wanted to not like Will Smith. He was very popular for a while. They wanted to latch upon a reason to
I think
now
people always
overtly
kind
hate
of
him.
wanted to not like Will Smith to begin with.
Yes.
It's like, oh, he's a little too perfect. Who does he think he is? Like there was definitely that, and I think that that slap did give people permission to be like, haha, I always knew there was something up with that guy who seemed very perfect and is married to one of the most beautiful women who has like ever existed on the planet. In my opinion, I guess, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Like there are, sometimes people are just like, oh, I want to be proven right about that person. I will say the thing that bothered me with the other thing that you were talking about is it's like the one and only subject where people insist that getting the facts wrong about the situation makes like their case better and will actually actively get mad at you if you say like if you say things correctly, like, if you're like, oh, Sunyi was not his literal adopted daughter. Her father is Andre Previn, who is a person who exists. He was a musician. He's a very famous person. We don't have to pretend that Andre Previn doesn't exist now.
Oh yeah.
That's weird. He had nothing to do with it. He was an asshole for leaving his wife for Mia Farrow, I will say. That whole situation was fucked as well. But you know about that, right?
Yeah.
Beware of young girls and everything.
It's so interesting, I guess, because to your point, it is simpler to just say and that had been the joke for going on 30 years, that he slept with and married his daughter. And to me, it's more,
but you don't have to keep
the reality of it is that, for myself personally, I think as someone who respects blended families, if my son's sister should be off limits, even if I am not related to his sister, clearly, Ronan, then known as Satchel, which everyone's okay with people changing. No one says like from now on, Ronan Farrell must only be referred to as Satchel.
Someone was like, well, that's because Satchel was too Jewish. I'm like, no, he was named after Satchel Paige, who was a black person. Like, that's not.
There's this, but it's all documented. It's always frustrating.
No one has to make weird things up. Like, I never understand that. And it's the only thing where people are like, no, we have to get things incorrect here, or else you're, caping for a rapist.
It's clearly documented that he was named after his sport, and you don't need to make that weird, because people name their kids after sports heroes or music people that they like.
So I was like, well, Satchel was a Jewish name, so I was like, it was a very weird thing. I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah. So, but yeah, and Ronan had viewed that as being a violation. He now says, and that's why he doesn't talk to his father. That's obviously between him and his father.
Yeah, I don't care.
I always kind of go as
it was not that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just interesting because it was sort of, I always find myself in a situation of people thinking, oh, your criticism of his past work, where you're kind of like, oh my God, Manhattan is kind of, I feel like, homophobic in certain ways and misogynistic in certain ways. Here's my treatise, then gets like ripped to shreds as being, oh, you're either woke and just don't like Woody Allen because you believe all these things, and that's not actually what's happening. Or, my saying like, oh, well, I think Broadway Danny Rose and Zelig still hold up, and here's things I like about that. Oh, you're caping for a rapist. And it's just like, okay, well, that's also kind of, so I think it's very hard for people to have.
I just avoid the subject altogether.
Oh yeah,
honestly,
it's
I do.
weird.
Like, I'm just like, nope, I'm staying out of it, because I will, like, I don't know. I find the thing where you can't say the like there are certain facts that you're just like not supposed to mention for some reason that have no bearing on literally anything else, but you're supposed to like not. I don't know. I just find it weird. It makes me uncomfortable. It's like
Can I be throw a little shade here? So you sent me some of it. I think might have been a mutual of yours or someone. So I'm gonna be vague here, but someone had the joke of he's retiring to spend time raising his daughter type thing, and that
made me uncomfortable. I'm sorry. Like
it also, and perhaps I should just react to it from a moral level, but just, I guess, creatively, I was kind of like, this is such an obvious, dull joke. And I look at what you do for a living. It's like, well, did you think this was a unique observation that you were?
I just don't think that I don't understand why criticism of him has to be like, and now we're infantilizing a 51-year-old woman, also too, for the cause. I find that weird. Also, I find it particularly weird because there is a whole history of infantilizing Asian women in general.
Oh, yeah.
So that's where I feel like, let's maybe not pretend that she's like a child.
Well, isn't that the art? Like, when people do that, they claim that they are doing something on behalf of an injured party, and then they wind up clearly not. Well, do you really care about this person? Because if you believe, let's say for the sake of argument, you believe that Suni is a victim, she was groomed, she was, was cut off from the rest of her family and has had to, essentially, her only let's say the sake of our only sexual partner has been this at the time middle-aged man, and now he's an old man, and she's going to have to like take care of as he dies. That's kind of sad. So why are you making jokes at her
At her
expense?
expense.
Because
Well,
he's
yeah.
not raising her. She's going to be someone who's not much older than I am, and her husband's 90 and probably not well. And that's kind of sad, just objectively, no matter what. So it just seems like a weird, yeah, to your point, like
I
making
just
why are
I
you trying to
feel
dunk
very
on someone?
importantly in general, and this is sort of getting off topic, but in like if you're going to go after someone criticism wise, make sure that like it hits like you're hitting the right target and you're not getting shrapnel anywhere else. It's why I always hate the I was and a lot of other people were too, like very bothered about the people who seemed like with Trump, they're like, haha, this is now my chance to make fun of fat people and not get criticized for it. I can say all the like terrible things I've been thinking about, fat people, about Trump, but like now I'm a good person for it. Or, people who say horrible sexist things about women who are, terrible conservatives um, or who are black, or like they're like now I'm just getting all my like evil out, but in a woke,
Mhm.
cool way, and that fucking drives me insane. Like,
Yes. I think dressing as a 1950s space diner uh is appropriate to because I've always said for me,
Space Diner. But
for me, fashion is an artistic expression.
yeah,
So to say that you can't
oh yeah,
make fun of someone's
criticizing, yeah,
artistic expression, well, I do. That's sort of a lot of my job. Like I criticize movies and films. So if someone is like dressing like Tudor Dixon,
yeah,
to say that I can't comment willingly, I'm not, because to me it's one thing to be, oh, look at that person at Walmart. I always hate those tweets. So look at that
yeah.
person at Walmart.
When
Well,
you're,
they're poor.
in that sense, you're like, that's critiquing taste, and that is a very big. There's a big difference between critiquing taste and critiquing,
Yeah, your
you know,
clothes. Yeah, that
the
person's clothes
quality or
aren't
whatever
very.
of clothes.
Their quality of clothing is bad because they are poor. You're making fun of the fact that they are poor, not
Yeah,
that this woman who presumably has means decided as a fashion choice, I want kind of the
yeah.
lollipop
And I'm
guild
a big
outfit.
fan of like big ass shoulders, obviously, but I'm not in this particular sweater, but but no, that was a big misfire. But I did. It's like the thing that bothers me is like when you can like sort of just like sense it in someone, like they've been like holding it back, like they, especially when it comes to people who are overweight, like it's like they've been holding it inside for so long, and then they're just like, aha, we found a bad person who's overweight and I can say all the terrible things I've been thinking all along. And that really fucking drives me insane.
Absolutely. Um, Before we go, I do want to. You'd written
Oh
about
yeah,
the She-Hulk show that I also very much enjoy. And what I liked about your piece, folks should read it. It's obviously up for today. Was that how men have trouble, especially between 18 and 34, with media no longer being specifically targeted to them, to the point where I often quote Dr. Frankenfurter. It's timely. I didn't make him for
yeah,
you.
please.
So it's like
I
this is
also
up
do
now.
that. I use that gif all the time. No, but yeah,
So this is not for you. This is for a different demo, and it's okay. And they will say, "Oh, it's pandering because it's only
yeah.
It's not pandering if it's about me." And for
Well, there's
She-Hulk,
a guy in my comments being like, imagine if someone said, well, this isn't for, for women, people would riot. And I'm like, no, it wasn't saying it's not specifically for men. It's not for asshole men who are going to be upset about this kind of thing.
yeah, uh,
So,
it's not being exclusive. It's saying we are centering. This is from. It is not. It's not targeting men, and by that, I think
yeah,
She-Hulk's a good example of this because I grew up reading the Byrne run. I was a John Byrne run in the late '80s, and it was clearly
I don't know
male.
what that is.
John Byrne is a comic artist. He wrote the
Okay,
She-Hulk, wrote and drew the She-Hulk series. It is very
okay.
male gazy. So obviously, She-Hulk was very much about guys being able to stare at. He even modeled the She-Hulk after a Playboy centerfold. Um, and you're supposed to like look at her ass or look at her, it's all very titillating.
Mhm.
And that's not how the show is. There's not scenes of CGI She-Hulk shaving her legs, seductively, let the camera close. There's really no, and this sounds weird, but look,
Is leg shaving hot? I don't know. Sorry.
if you watch a lot,
Besides the
there's
point.
tons of shots of, not that I collect, I'm just saying there are lots of video of women, of the male gaze, so things
Yeah.
of coming up from a woman's heels up to her
Yeah.
ass, watching her ass move and whatever. The show does not do that. It does not play upon She-Hulk in a salacious way. There's no shots of She-Hulk skipping rope, or always being exposed and stuff like that, which is a constant in that title that Byrne had done. And for a lot of folks who grew up on that, I think they were now in their middle aged expecting, oh, this is going to be the She-Hulk I'm going to get. And that's not what they're getting. The John Byrne series specifically had a storyline where She-Hulk can no longer become Jennifer Walters again. She gets stuck in her She-Hulk form, and she's delighted, because why wouldn't I want to be permanently quote unquote hot? And that's obviously not the character that we have here. This is a character who enjoys who she is in her real form, because why shouldn't you? This actress, this is my first time seeing this.
He's never seen Orphan Black, which is a jam.
But she's so she's delightful. I think folks have an issue probably with that change specifically. But it comes up with a lot of superhero stuff where it's no longer just from the perspective of men. It can also be from women. It is ironic also because there's a period where, the men are very happy for the popularity of these things. And the reason you get all these new Marvel shows and movies and whatever is because women are watching them unapologetically. Like, women and all audiences and minorities or whatever are watching them.
But like, here's the thing: what they would prefer, I think, would be if it was still targeting men, but women were watching it and being like, "This is totally acceptable to us." That would be the ideal, I imagine.
That's true. It's very funny you were unaware of the leg shaving theme in TV shows, movies. Do you ever see the show Who's the Boss?
Yes.
So there is apparently there's one episode, which I remember from being like 8 or so, whatever, where Tony sees Angela naked by accident because she thinks everyone's away, so she's gonna have a nice time in the tub.
Credits, yeah, no, I've seen that, yeah.
He walks right in on her, but they also do the shot of her leg, which is like not how people kind of bathe. It's not particularly, I don't know. I find maybe, but I sense that in reality, it's very hard to pose seductively while bathing.
Yeah, no, that's why I don't think it ever registered with me. But that was like a sexy thing. I'm constantly surprised by that kind of shit. I also didn't know that like every dude was super into Alyssa Milano. I feel like I could have like worked that to my advantage in some capacity. But yeah, men are fucking weird. I'm just glad I no longer have a wiki feed entry on it, frankly. Like that is...
You had a
I did. I heard something, yeah, like that. It was really upsetting. I don't know.
Oh, I yes, it's upsetting without consent.
Because I was just like, hey, everyone look at my side
toes. But I felt like, oh, isn't that mostly celebrities? So that was
it's like random chicks online as well.
It's random chicks. Okay, well, I was about to congratulate if you're making it big.
Yeah, no.
And then it's not. Then it's just gross. Sorry.
Again, y'all are terrible, but
it's sorry to dwell this topic, but it's one of those things of where like Quentin Tarantino is kind of like, look, if you won't even allow the plausible deniability that you are the women who are working for you are filming them in certain ways for your gratification. Yeah. We all know. Instead, you kind of go on TV.
We're supposed to pretend that that's not the case.
Yeah, you go on TV, you go on podcasts, just like just saying like essentially what's happening, which would be terrible for me, right? Like I just think of it
Yeah.
as myself. It's one thing, it's like, okay, well, I have this shirtless scene. No one wants to see me shirtless, but saying I have this shirtless scene, it's the movie, whatever, fine. But like the director being like, and then I go home with the video. It's like, oh my God, like it's like a very horrible thing. And Tarantino will do that. He talks about like how he gets, he loves like, okay, here's the actors. I'm gonna do the foot shot and something. And like, I mean, it's just hard to kind of feel professional about the fact that it feels as if you are making porn. Porn is not bad, but porn
Mhm.
without consent is
It's
not.
definitely bad.
And so that's so weird. That's just a weird thing. Men are strange. I think it's strange to be a woman on the internet. I think, as you have said.
Yes, I regularly send Stephen, hey, it's weird being a woman on the internet missives. Um, but yeah, no, the thing about this whole thing though is like this, it's just the incredible rage. It's like, I don't think I've ever been as angry about anything as a man is about She-Hulk not appealing to him personally. And which is actually, interestingly enough, kind of a like plot point in the show. Like, no spoilers because it's the first episode. Part of the issue, part of the reason that she can change back and forth more easily than the regular Hulk is because she's just like, well, I'm used to sublimating my rage.
Yeah.
Because being a woman is extremely enraging all of the time.
Men
And
hated that. Oh my God, they were so angry. And so
yeah, they were so pissed about the green M&Ms like not being sexy anymore. It was like someone stabbed their favorite pet in the head level of anger.
yeah, and the sort of you go on YouTube and some of the stuff, both for Moses Ingram, the black actor, is playing a villain on Star Wars, and here the She-Hulk, and you would think it's parody because you have
Yeah,
some faith in mankind, because it's like a guy literally looking deranged and like pointing at the She-Hulk and going like, woke She-Hulk ruins everything or whatever. And then you click on it out of curiosity. It's like, oh, this is obviously playing upon that, the silliness. And instead it's like completely true. Like,
yeah.
the guy is angry and spent this time and feels entitled. So it's not like, oh, this is the She-Hulk show that's being done and I don't like it. It's like, oh, I wanted my She-Hulk,
It,
who's going to
it's more
be
like
lots of
yeah,
bikini shots of She-Hulk. She-Hulk, why isn't She-Hulk being shot at in the chest in her sweater and now she's naked? I want to see, like, this was happening in the comic. And look, you know, that's what we read, but that's not what we do anymore. It's been
yeah.
30 years, and that's kind of
And things can change and evolve, and that's fine. I think a lot of what it is, though, it's not necessarily like, oh, I was really looking forward to seeing She-Hulk's tits. It's more like, I am being rejected. I am no longer in charge of the culture. The culture is not designed specifically to appeal to me, and that means that I am being left out. I think that's very much what it is. It's they feel their power slipping away. If it is, more normal to make a show with a like, smart, cool, She-Hulk than like
Hmm.
bimbo She-Hulk, then the men have lost. Like
Well,
they've lost
yeah.
something in the culture. Like it's not there. They've lost control. And
And
I think that's a lot of what it is.
after watching the first few episodes, I commented on how it especially is in relief in certain ways. You can clearly see that women are sort of producing the show, making the show, and how it's in relief to what was presented as feminist work from, say, Josh Whedon or whatever, where it's clearly like women are friends, not
Yeah,
just, they clearly are friends. There's no storyline where her best friend is jealous of She-Hulk. She-Hulk gets all this attention. It's completely supportive. The quote unquote mean girl character is not always the mean. No, it's like,
yeah.
okay, we get along, but now we're friends. We work together, and we're just different. Like it's
Yeah.
clearly not certain male tropes of how women interact based
Yeah.
upon male writers who never spent time around women and have the idea that women have no friends. There is not like there's no geeky Xander character on
Yeah.
the show, like who
Also,
himself is
just
kind of
quickly,
toxic.
yay Renee Elise Goldsberry being on the show because I love her, but she's,
She's
you know,
wonderful.
we gotta.
She's great in the role. I think she's in
If
our
we didn't mention Hamilton at least once, would it be a Wonkette Sunday podcast?
yes, she is the yes, she is in the GIF at the top of the head for
Yeah,
this.
I saw that.
She's wonderful. Um I she's doing a great role in this
Yeah.
part. And of course folks are upset because she's playing a quote unquote white character from the comics.
Yeah, that's
God
yeah.
forbid. God forbid that happens.
Oh no.
So
And again, it's all about losing fucking control. It's it.
well, I think we're coming up on time. What else do you have? Or any final thoughts for the folks at home?
Men are weird, and it's weird being a woman on the internet or in life. No.
I can't.
No,
I
one thing
can't.
that I will say, and I've been on this freaking lately, and I made the same point in my post here, is that there is literally no good way to be a woman. There's also no good way to be a woman who is famous, because if you are a woman who is famous and nice looking, you would not be famous if you weren't so nice looking. And if you are a woman who is famous and not nice looking, then you have like this is an attack on heterosexual men, because no one wants you to be happy. So truly, the moral of every story these days is there's no good way to be a woman, or at least any story that involves us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I that's on that uplifting note, but true. We can't just lie to you and
Yeah.
make you happy. So thank you, Robin. Thank you everyone for tuning in. This is up on YouTube. Please like, share, subscribe, and we will catch you next time. Take care.
Bye.